Hi! I was not planning on doing this video. This was supposed to be a real easy project. I was going to take this lovely Epiphone SG 400 Pro and swap in some genuine Gibson pickups and the rest of the associated electronics with it, because I've been told that, that there's a big difference. So I thought this was going to be a real easy job, plug and play. It should take maybe half an hour. It did turn out that I had one wire. There's a ground wire that I had to desolder on the back of this Epiphone right here, which I'm assuming is going to connect the metal pieces on the top side of the guitar to the metal pieces on the bottom side of the guitar and prevent I don't know, some kind of ground loop or something. But as you can see, this project is incomplete. So let's talk about some of the differences between Epiphone and Gibson hardware, and what you need to be prepared to do if you want to make a swap. I have yet to determine whether or not the swap is viable, but I'm going to do the best I can. I'm a pretty reasonable person, but right now I'm feeling pretty unreasonable because I want to put these components in even though they don't fit. Alright, so we're going to start off with something that's really easy. If you just want to swap pickups, it's not a difficult thing. Here's our Epiphone pickup. There's two differences. One of them, you're going to see that this connector is a different design than the Gibson connector, which I knew about, and you can apparently go and buy an adapter for that, so that's an easy fix. The other thing that you're going to find is that the screws are not the same length, and so it turns out that if you want to make this swap, I'll show you the modification you have to do. Get into that hole and you'll see where the routing is, and then you will see where I had to drill an additional hole to make the clearance so that would work out for us. Not a big deal. The hole had to be bigger for the front because the pickup is set in a little bit deeper into the body. The back one I might not have had to drill out at all, but I did anyways. So that's the first thing you're going to notice. The second problem you're going to see is with regard to these pots. So we're looking at the pots on the Epiphone, and you will see that they are all separate, and you stick them individually into the holes and then tighten down the retaining screw nut on the other side, and you're good to go. However, with the Gibson, it's one piece on an integrated circuit board, and so it turns out the problem with that is right here. And here's our problem. This is the routed area for where that assembly goes, and you will see I've already spent a little bit of time trying to make that routing larger to accommodate that integrated circuit board and those pots that are not movable. And well, it turns out I'm going to have to go to the hardware store and get another routing bit with a little bit more bite to it, because that's going to take a substantial amount of material removal just to get those into that hole. But wait, that's not all. So another thing I've noticed, we will go down again to these pots, and what you're going to see is the size of the hole for these pots it's looking like just about 10 millimeters, maybe a little bit smaller. And once we look at the Epiphone pot, you're going to see that that is only about 7.5 to 8 millimeters. So holes aren't big enough. So we're going to have to drill out some holes. That sucks. Alright, so the other thing is the switches for toggling the pickups. And so here's the Epiphone one. A lot of people don't like this. I don't know why. I think it works just fine. But The Gibson one is a different design. You can see it's got this huge poles to throw. And of course the other difference is that this little knob here is not the same threading as this little knob here. So if you happen to score a white one and your guitar is black, then you're going to have to find another knob for that, which sucks. So those are the issues that we're running into with doing this swap. So I've reamed this out enough that I can fit this in. So it's just nice and snug. Which brings us to the next problem, which is aligning the holes. So now we can see, as much as I would like for these to line up perfectly and just be able to drill them out, they do not line up perfectly. You see, they push to the edges. So I'm going to use a step drill to widen them a little bit, and then I'll probably have to use a round file to get the last millimeter or two to get everything even. Some tape to mark which way I need to go on that. So I've taken some tape and I've marked which direction I need to start grinding. So again, if you're planning on making this swap to the Gibson pots and you have any sense at all, probably shouldn't do it. But if you're a moron, drive on. Alright, so we have one more thing. This jack does not quite fit either, so I'm going to hit that up to the next size on this. It's just tiny bit too small. Perfect. So here's where we're at. Here's my 4 holes. I'll bring up a little bit tighter on this so you can see how misshapen they are, but they're going to work. I had to stretch everything out a little bit, but it's all going to get covered up with washers and the knobs. But there it is, everything's going to fit just fine. It did take quite a bit of work. In case you're wondering what kind of tool I used to drill out the back side of this. So what I have here is a rasp, a rotary rasp that I got at the hardware store. It's not perfect, but it did the job. And the last thing I'm going to do is finish this off with a little bit of sandpaper from a Dremel tool. See how that works. Alright, and that should be it. We should be ready to accept Gibson parts. So there's yet another problem. This potentiometer blocks the hole where the pickup wiring comes out. So we've got to come up with a solution for that. Well, let's see if that works. And there, like magic, all of those holes are covered up and you never know they were in there. So from here out, everything should be plug and play. Okay, the neck one's in. And the bridge one is in. Perfect. Now I do have a tiny bit of soldering. So I'm just going to make a little pile of solder on this. Make sure I get the wire hot. And there we go. And here's that selector switch. And here is the jack. Let's see what it is. Just when I thought I had victory, it turns out I have defeat. So here's the problem. The selector switch on the Gibson is about, I don't know, maybe 3/8 of an inch tall for that thread, and it's more like 5/8 or 6/8 of an inch tall on the Epiphone. And like I said before, I'd have to change out the knob anyways. So I'm afraid the only way I'm going to be able to solve this is to go ahead and reuse the Epiphone switch by soldering. It's just taking these wires off and soldering them up. Alright, I was just about to start cutting things and soldering until I saw this. Let's see if we can get this up close enough for you to see. There's a lip on this little nut that holds that selector switch in place. And that nut, especially since I use my little drill, will just barely tuck in there. And it creates just enough of a thread that if I take and push the selector switch through, I can slide that ring over there, catch a little bit of thread, and tighten it up. And I probably need a pair of pliers to get that the way I want it. But it's going to work. Okay, we're back in business. That one really had me scared there. I thought I was going to not be able to use all Gibson components, but it worked out in the end. That should be everything, folks. By the way, I got all these components from the Stratosphere. It's an eBay business storefront, and they've been fantastic. I've bought a lot of things from them over the years, and tunes. All right, perfect. We are just about ready to put some strings on this thing and see what she'll do. Alright, we're back in business. We got some strings on there, and I got my black control knob, and I just got some new volume and tone knobs. I think they look pretty good. So the next question is, after all this mess, well, two things. One, does it work? And two, is it worth it? So yes, everything absolutely works, and yeah, I think it's worth it. The guitar sounds phenomenal. It sounds like a Gibson. Before it sounded like a great guitar, now it sounds like a Gibson guitar. There's just a difference. You see people doing all these blindfolded tests and all this nonsense, but you can tell. You can definitely tell. I don't feel any need to go and buy a Gibson now because as far as I'm concerned, I have one. It's exactly what I was looking for. So this is fairly, just a little bit dirty on the rhythm on the front pickup here only. Volume turned down a little bit. So it sounds You know, it's got a little bit of dirt to it. It's turned down. It sounds real good. It sounds real smooth and mellow. If we crank it up a little bit, drop that switch over to the treble, and now on the back pickup with everything tone controls turned up, volume controls turned up, and it's definitely a little bit meatier now. So I'm going to turn up the gain a little bit. And by the way, this is a Laney Pro Tube lead. It's a real old 50-watt tube amp from the 80s. It's all analog. It's got the same tube profile that you would find in a Marshall JCM 800, but it only cost me a couple $100 used on eBay, and had the tubes replaced and cleaned up. So that's my rig. It's just going straight into there. I don't have my effects pedals hooked up or anything. So this is what you get. Is what you see is what you get with the sound on this. So it sounds a lot meaner with the gain turned up. I've got it cranked up pretty high right now. Let's see what we can do. Sounds pretty wicked. I mean, that sounds, you know, full-on SG Gibson. It's just a badass crunchy sound. Really love it. So it has that crunch that you would expect from an SG or from a Les Paul. It just sounds really good. I'm super happy with it. So if you decide that you want to do this to your guitar, I would highly recommend it, as long as you have the skill and feel that you can pull it off without ruining your guitar. It took me several hours and quite a bit of frustration, but when all is said and done, it's a beautiful guitar, and now it sounds amazing. So, well, best of luck to you.